Love burns slow like fire and rain. Hold me close, erase the pain. Float with me to the bottom deep in your embrace. My heart's at ease. Rise with me through ashes high up to heaven. Sweet lullaby up to heaven, you and I.
Sunday Wednesdays. It was a recent tradition for Meredith and Devon. After they got off lifeguard duty, they would head downtown to Scream Cream for a buy-one, get-one free ice cream sundae. Mid-August in Glenville was a scorcher. Every day this week had been in the mid-90s. Meredith drove her 2007 VW Jetta into the back lot, parking in her usual spot, as Devon rode shotgun, while the sounds of Umbrella by Rihanna lasted until the engine shut off. They hopped out and headed towards the back entrance of Scream Cream until they heard him. "Howdy, ladies," said Mac, blocking their path. He stood there with a mischievous smile in his cut-off T-shirt, backwards hat, and flip-flops, lowering his aviators to get a better look. His attitude and physique indicated he was a couple years older than the just graduated out of high school Meredith and Devon. Mac was 6 foot tall, with a highly curated physique and tan. He loved to show it off, as evidenced by the cut-off T-shirt and high shorts. "Not returning my texts, Meredith?" "Mac, I told you, I'm not interested," Meredith responded, trying to be courteous. "Not interested? Funny. You seemed pretty interested in my pool a couple weeks ago." "Oh, hi, Devon," Mac said, turning towards Devon with an obviously fake smile. "That was a mistake. I said I wasn't interested. I'm sorry. Can you please—" Mac blocked their second attempt to go in through the back entrance. "See, you keep saying that. Yet, you clearly are interested, so I'm just trying to understand why you would feel the need to disrespect me in front of my friends this morning when I said hello to you and you kept walking as if you didn't know me. Mac, don't be a dick." Mac put his finger up towards his mouth menacingly, fuming. "This has nothing to do with you, Devon, so please just shut up." "Don't tell her to shut—" Mac cut off Meredith quickly. "I just want honesty." "That's all I'm asking for, Meredith. It's not nice to wear two faces, is it?" "Mac, I'm sorry. Please just let us—" Mac grabbed Meredith's wrist hard, pulling her closer to him. "Mac, let her go," Devon asserted. "Shut up. I told you once already, Devon. Your friend here thinks it's cool to hook up with me and then pretend it never happened, which makes me look like a liar. You do not disrespect me. I'm a cop, you little slut. Did you forget that? All I'm asking for is some goddamn Mac's body flew up against the back wall of the shop, followed quickly by the sounds of choking. Meredith and Devon stood there in shock. Holding Mac up against the wall, by his throat, his feet inches off the ground, was Gavin, staring through the eyes of Mac as he held him up against the wall, using only his right hand. Gavin was about 6'2". He stood there in his black T-shirt with the words Fort Morgan Beach on the back and worn faded jeans, complete with steel-tipped boots. His black hat was pulled down low, making it hard to see his eyes. He was scrawny. The mechanics of his ability to hold Mac, who had probably 20 pounds of muscle over Gavin, in place with just one hand, seemed impossible. Meredith watched Mac's feet dangle in the air as this mysterious man's black steel-tipped boots remained on the ground. Mac was frantically trying to chop down Gavin's wrist, but Gavin's arm never budged. It never wavered. He had complete control of Mac's body. Mac was now foaming out of the mouth as his breathing became erratic. He kept Mac's body against the wall, his body unflinching for several more seconds, until Meredith finally said, "Stop!" Mac dropped to the ground immediately, as if there was an on-off switch behind Gavin. Mac was now desperately trying to gain back control of his breath. He sat up, but stopped, quickly realizing that was not an option yet. Meredith and Devon watched this, dumbfounded. They turned from Mac, back up towards Gavin, who knelt down towards Mac and looked through him. Meredith tried to form a word, but she couldn't. Everything about this was so sudden, her brain had not been able to conduct a cohesive thought. Gavin briefly took off his hat. Gavin had a shaved head and vivid blue eyes. Thanks, Devon said, almost more of a question. Still kind of in shock, her heart racing. Gavin put his low black hat back on, quickly turned away, and walked down the alley way back onto the main street. Meredith was about to say something until Mac got up and ran through both of them, hitting their shoulders on the way towards his nearby brand-new black Saab with the top down. Mac turned on the engine, then opened his car door to puke twice as Devon laughed, until Mac was able to close his door and then peel off and out of the parking lot onto the Main Street road. Meredith turned back towards the skinny alley. She saw Gavin walking out onto the side road. "Hey!" she yelled out, taking a couple steps towards his direction until she saw him hop into the passenger side of the beaten-down red 1995 Chevrolet CK 1500, the back of which was filled to the brim with a lawnmower, weed whackers, and bags of mulch. "Hey!" Meredith yelled out again as the beat-up pickup truck drove away. Alabama was down 42-28, with 6 minutes left in the fourth. This was the marquee Saturday college football game, and Gramps was pissed he had to miss it. "God damn it, run the ball, for Pete's sake." He shook his head and sipped his Black Dog beer, keeping it low, and then sticking it back in the cup holder. $11 for a 30-pack. Couldn't beat that price. Never mind that the beer tasted like water. Gramps had a shaved head with matching tattoos on both arms. They were dog tags. The names were hard to read, but there was at least 3 on both arms. They stopped just below his wrist. His right hand shook. You wouldn't notice, and had now learned to keep his hand in his pockets whenever he wasn't holding something. He also walked with a slight limp. Not the best for someone who still worked in physical labor all day. "You got the best damned offensive line in the nation, and you want to throw the ball? The hell kind of sense does that make?" That question was aimed at Gavin, sitting in the passenger seat staring out the window. The truck pulled up outside Rinaldi's Pizza, sitting at the corner of LaRue and Pontic. Gramps turned off the engine, but as he was about to open his car door, "Hey, you want to run in? Pick up the pie?" Gavin turned, avoiding eye contact. "Never mind that, I'll run in. You listen to the game?" Gramps nodded and then got out, going round the truck and walking inside the pizzeria. Gavin sunk in his seat. He wanted to say yes, go inside, but he wasn't ready. A group of high school girls walked past him, talking and laughing. He didn't look up, just stared off. The living room was tiny, 12 by 10. Even the term living room felt generous. One slender window above the narrow sink. Loose beer cans sprawled about the room. Gramps took a big bite and then placed the slice back into the box. He was still wearing his black Fort Morgan Beach t-shirt and jeans as he watched local news. "High of 95 today, and tomorrow, Lord have mercy. You make sure to stay hydrated, Gav. Fella I worked with back in the day. Manuel. He was a big guy. I remember we was going through the woods, clearing space, and he just dropped. He didn't have any insurance, so we had to just put ice on him. After about 10 minutes, he tried working again, but he just couldn't stand the heat, so boss had to drop him. He thought it was 'cause he was an illegal. Well, nothing to do with that. It's 'cause the man couldn't stand the heat. That's all that was. He was a good worker." Gavin stood up, taking the plate off of his lap and washing it off in the sink. The dark blue light slid in from the slender window, hitting Gavin's face. "Did you eat enough?" Gramps asked. "I did, thank you." This was the normal decibel level for Gavin. Low, subdued. "We got ice cream in the freezer, if you want it." "No, thanks. I'm going to bed." "Good night, Gramps." "All right, then. Let Boomer out before you pack it in." Gavin exited the trailer, followed by Boomer, a pudgy black lab who rounded the trailer to do his business, as he had done roughly 5,000 times before. The tiny dirt road had trailers about every 50 feet on both sides for roughly a quarter mile. Gavin slid into the chair and leaned his head back, looking up into the sky. He took a long, deep breath and exhaled. Boomer came strolling back and then sat right at Gavin's feet. Gavin reached down to scratch behind his ears, which he always appreciated. Gavin reached into his pocket and took out a small bottle of pills. The outside was pitch black with no labeling, just a yellow pop top. Gavin put 2 in his hand and then swallowed them down without water. He sunk into the long chair, staring up at the black sky. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Twirling the strain of the whistle was mandatory, not literally, but every lifeguard who had ever sat in this chair had twirled the whistle around their finger by the string ad nauseum as a means to pass the time. The beach was packed. Mid-90s weather will do that to a beach, especially a nice beach like Fort Morgan. This was considered an upscale beach, which was not a common phrase used to describe most beaches in Alabama, but this one sat on the Gulf. It was nice. Lifeguards got paid better here than at the other beaches. You needed an in. This wasn't based on who submitted first. This was based on who knew who. Luckily for Meredith and Devin, they had parents who knew people. Devin blew the whistle loudly. She stood up, as did Meredith, in their red lifeguard bathing suits and made big arm-waving motions to come in closer. "Yes, you dummy," Devin said loud enough for her and Meredith to hear. "Jesus, that dude, my last nerve." She exhaled loudly and then took a big swig from her water bottle. She turned back towards Meredith to ask, "What time is lunch?" The joint lit up and was inhaled multiple times by Devin before handing off to the guy sitting next to her behind the bathrooms. Justin had light brown skin and very low-cut blonde hair. Today he was wearing a bright yellow Golden State Warriors Latrell Sprewell jersey and light green cargo shorts to complement his yellow and green painted toenails. He was a checklist of things to make you stick out around this Alabama town. Black. Well, half black. Blonde hair. Well, it was black, but he dyed it blonde. Bright clothing. A man who liked men. Sometimes. The last of which always caught people off guard. How could a boy who dresses like that also like girls? This was a common question, only posed directly by older folks. He was a walking contradiction with a community that was marred by a deep, dark history, by people who were not welcoming to folks who didn't look like them. "You take it," Justin said. "No, I'm good," Devin replied. "And I have dinner with my grandparents tonight." Justin passed the joint across towards Meredith. "Finish it." Meredith waved it off. "All right, then." Justin smoked the joint. This was their hideout. Behind the bathrooms by the groundskeeper's station. Nobody ever came this far from the beach. Certainly nobody that could ever get them in trouble for occasionally getting high after finishing a hot shift. "Mare, look," Devin said, staring up ahead. They all turned. Pushing an old, probably no longer available for purchase, Bobcat push lawnmower down the hill towards the groundskeeper gate was Gavin. "It's him." "Him who?" Meredith asked quickly. "That's the guy who choked out Mac." "Oh, shit." Justin stood up, transfixed by Gavin. "He got out?" "Got out?" Meredith asked towards Justin. "Out from where? Y'all don't know who that is?" Meredith and Devin shook their heads, salivating with anticipation. "Who is it?" Devin asked. Justin turned to look back towards Gavin. "That's the dude whose family got eaten by wolves." Gramps didn't need an alarm clock. When you've been waking up at the same time every day for going on 30 years, your body sheds any need for clocks. He turned on the one working boiler to heat up some water to make his morning coffee as he yawned, scratching his belly. The fold-out cot was neatly placed back into its upright position. Gramps heard something outside. Exiting the small trailer into the blue morning light, he saw Gavin loading the back of the truck. It was nearly full already. "How long you been up?" "Not too long," Gavin said, putting the back of the truck up. Gramps was worried about Gavin. Most recently, he was worried that Gavin wasn't sleeping. He never saw him sleep. He would see him lying down on the tiny fold-up cot in the trailer living room, but he never really saw him asleep. Gramps was an early riser, but Gavin would always be up before him, loading up the truck, or making breakfast. He admired his grandson, but he also worried about him. It had been a while since he had someone to worry for. The concession stand was beginning to crack. Minimal care was shown in the original construction. It had been built by the brothers of the original owners of this very tiny beach known as Captain's Island, which was a 20-minute ferry ride off from Fort Morgan Beach. Gramps and Gavin had taken the first ferry out that morning, 7:12 a.m. They wanted to beat the heat, which seemed an impossible task, considering it was already 84 degrees outside. Gramps had already drunk half of his zero-sugar Gatorade and was sidestepping towards the shade any chance he got. Gavin seemed resilient. He was ripping off old wooden tiles from the back of the concession stand and dumping them into the wheelbarrow with ease. You could barely see him sweat, Gramps thought, envious, until he saw something which made him concerned. "Gav!" Gavin turned from the top of the ladder as Gramps walked up from below. "Your arm!" Gavin turned to look. There was blood dripping down from his right wrist to his right elbow, enough that it was beginning to form a puddle at the foot of his ladder. "Put this on, son," Gramps said as he held up a cheap Rite Aid bandage. Gavin put it on and then tucked the bandage wrapping into his back pocket, turning towards the decrepit wood paneling and continuing to rip them out one by one, unfazed by the heat. Gramps took a step backwards into the shade as he wiped his damp forehead with his pasty elbow. The heat was merciless. As Gramps sat in the shade under the tree, enjoying his tuna fish sandwich, he positioned his back to rest against the nearby oak tree. Captain's Island on a Friday afternoon was littered with various summer camps, all vying for its attention, along with empty spots to tan and socialize. For Gramps, it was a peek inside youth, something that had passed him by a long time ago. He watched Gavin take the full wheelbarrow of old wood paneling and dump it into the dumpster behind the bathrooms. Gramps yelled in his direction, "Gav, lunch!" Gavin turned, threw out the rest of the wood paneling, and then steered the now empty wheelbarrow towards the rest of their supplies off to the side of the now packed with little kids and camp counselors' concession stand line. Gavin kept his head down, never making eye contact. As he sat next to Gramps, he was reminded, "Pills, son." Gavin reached into his now hot black work pants pocket and pulled out a little U-line white Packer bottle of pills, dumping 2 into his hand, before tossing them back with a swig out of his Swell water bottle. "How about that, Swell? Ain't that something?" Gramps loved his Swell water bottle. As someone who was anything but materialistic, he would never walk past an opportunity to bask in the seemingly impossible physics that allowed this majestic water bottle to retain cool water temperatures at all times, even in the dead of summer. Gavin mustered a smile to acknowledge Gramps' admiration of the water bottle, and then slightly turned, feeling something over his shoulder. He looked up. At first, he thought it was a mirage. "Hey." It was Meredith. She was wearing a white tank top and small jean shorts. She stood in a silhouette as the sun bounced off her blonde hair. "I think she's talking to you, son." Gavin realized this wasn't a mirage. "Hello," he finally said, out loud. "My friend is having a party tonight. You should come." Gavin searched for words. He searched for a pulse. His brain couldn't compute. There was silence. Too much silence for Gramps. He'd love to. Gavin turned to Gramps quickly, trying to... Words, he assumed. His mouth was trying to open and say words, but that didn't happen. Gramps just smirked at him. Meredith bent down and drew Gavin's attention by grabbing his right wrist and turning it over. She was writing something. Her face was within 2 feet of his own. When she finally finished, try not to sweat. Meredith glanced up at him as her sunglasses slid down just enough to give a window into her eyes. As they locked, and she smiled. Meredith bounced back up. Take it easy, she said towards Gramps. You too, sweetheart. They watched her walk away, cooler than the other side of the pillow. She rounded the corner of the concession stand and was gone. Gavin was in awe. Well, Gramps said. Looks like you got a date, my boy. What to wear had never been a question before, but he had a party to attend, and the girl who invited him had a smile that nearly made him an actual human. He didn't have many options. Gavin's wardrobe was limited. He was staring at a couple T-shirts, different colored shirts, some cargo shorts, a pair of black slacks, and jeans. A couple of minutes later, Gavin walked out in a plain white T-shirt and jeans. Gramps saw him as he sat in his recliner watching a college football game. Maybe next week we can find you some, fancier clothes. Gramps was trying to be helpful, knowing full well he didn't own any fancy clothes and certainly couldn't help in locating or selecting what fancy clothes would look best. Gavin nodded anyway and told him that would be great. Before he walked out, he told his Gramps, I'll be back in a little bit. Hey, Gav, Gramps said, stopping Gavin in the doorway. Be nice to that girl, 'cause she seems nice. All right? Yes, sir. You have fun tonight. Don't come back too early. Understand? Yes, sir. All right, then, go on now. Gramps sipped his beer as Gavin turned to walk outside. He got into Gramps' truck and headed on out to the first party he had ever been to. He could see the fire. It was the only thing he could see from down the road. Beyond the grass lot filled with cars, all of which were much newer and nicer than the truck he was getting out of, was where everyone hung out. This was known as the Stick, an opening in the woods centered around a big root of an old tree that was rumored to have been there for centuries. In the 1970s, it became a hangout for high school kids and post-high school kids who still wished they were in high school. The fire was big, but contained. Parents and authorities let the kids hang here because there was no chance of it spreading to the surrounding wooded areas. There was a keg planted on each corner of the Stick. This was geographical perfection for underage drinking. Gavin walked through the trees until he got to the lip of the Stick. It was packed. Music was blasting. It was a hip-hop song he had never heard of. Kids his age were all over the place. There had to be close to 100 kids altogether. Some older, some younger, mostly right around his age. He was feeling nervous. He knew he didn't belong here. He looked around for Meredith. Couldn't see her. He started to tighten up. Walking through the crowd felt like too much. He would have to be seen. By lots of people. Lots of people he didn't know. He hadn't been seen before. Not for a long time. He started to sweat a little. His legs cramped. He wasn't moving. He had plopped himself into this spot and couldn't bring himself to actually join the party. Until a hand touched his. You made it. Meredith smiled as she wrapped his hand in hers. Standing right behind him. Her face lit up by the fire 20 feet away. Come on. My friends are over there. Just beyond the Stick, as the woods began to form again, were a series of rocks. This was where you could go to hide while remaining social. Meredith led him through the crowd of people as she lowered her hooded sweatshirt just low enough to cover her face. She was trying to make Gavin feel comfortable by being invisible. He kept his head low as all the other kids around him talked and drank, enjoying this cool summer night. When they got to the rocks, Justin and Devin were sitting on top of Simon. Simon was the very jagged rock that stood about 8 feet up off the ground. All of the rocks had names, as Gavin would find out. It was a way to find your friends if any of them snuck away for intimacy. Meet me at Simon was an easy course of regrouping prior to finding your car. Guys, this is Gavin. Devin reached down with a big smile. Hi, Gavin. I'm Devin. Gavin reached up just barely tall enough to shake her hand. Hi, he responded, avoiding eye contact. Justin crawled down from the back and hopped off, walking over towards Gavin. Gavin, you might not remember me. It's been a long time. Justin hugged Gavin, which took him off guard. Meredith and Devin smiled at each other, knowing how much pleasure Justin got in being affectionate towards men who were not comfortable being affectionate. Justin prided himself as a human icebreaker. We went to school together. Gavin looked at Justin and began to nod, slightly. I do. Remember you. How can anyone forget? Am I right? Justin's braggadocious personality made Devin and Meredith roll their eyes. Do you want a drink? Gavin turned to Meredith. He opened his mouth, but seemed nervous. He desperately wanted to not be nervous. No, thanks. That's cool, she said. I don't really drink either. Uh-huh, Devin said, smiling from up above, playfully busting her best friend's chops. You hush up there, Meredith responded. Smoke? Justin asked. You smoke? No. Thanks, though. It's good to see you, bro, Justin said, as his chin lit up from the blaze of his joint. Devin was motioning up towards something. Meredith followed her line of sight. Standing by the fire was Mac and several of his friends. They were looking over this way. It was not a friendly look. Maybe we should take a walk? No, Meredith said. We're good right here. Gavin turned to look at Mac and his friends. A sense of calm seemed to wash over Gavin. He was no longer nervous. When his eyes locked with Mac, Mac turned away, and his minions followed him from the fire to the keg. This was when they explained the names of the different rocks, how they met Justin, their summer working at the beach, the different strands of weed, a recent movie with Shia LaBeouf where he thought his neighbor was a murderer, a guy that Devin was kind of seeing who Meredith and Justin thought she was head over heels in love with, but she disagreed. The conversation ran the gamut. None of it involved Gavin's life, who he was, what he thought. They tried to be cordial, inviting him to join the conversation, but Gavin just sat there, quietly, nodding and smiling, sometimes laughing. He kept a watchful eye on Mac, until Mac was nowhere to be seen. Let's go to the lake. And so they went. It was the length of a football field, almost exactly, between the stick and the lake. All of the geographical elements were in place. Devin had brought her backpack, which contained several towels to sit on. Along the edge of the lake were various friend groups, most of them hanging out on the sand, smoking and drinking. Occasionally, you would hear the sounds of splashing. Y'all know Gavin used to play football? Gavin? Football stud, huh? What position? Quarterback, Justin answered for him. Devin sarcastically started fanning herself. Ooh la la, she said, as Meredith lightly hit her shoulder to stop. And defensive end, Justin added. This dude was legit. He was the one who my dad would point to and say, why can't you be more like that guy? I said, 'cause that guy is that guy. And I'm me, Papa. How profound, Justin, Devin said mockingly. That was right about the time my football career ended, Justin concluded. Which led to what career? Devin sarcastically asked. Excellent question. Let's leave that open-ended for the moment. It's good to have you back, Gav. Thanks, Gav told him. Now, if y'all will excuse me, I need to plan my career, And get in that water. Justin stripped down to his underwear and ran into the water. He does that, Devin told Gavin. I apologize on his behalf. Devin, Meredith, and Gavin remained. Justin yelled at them from the water. What are you waiting for? Get in! Damn it, Devin said. I have to. Wish me luck. Devin stripped down to her bra and underwear and then charged into the water, swimming towards Justin as he did backstrokes in a circle. They're crazy, Meredith said, now alone with Gavin for the first time. I like them, Gavin told her. Yeah, I like them too. They watched Justin and Devin swim under the moonlight sky. Laughing and splashing, Meredith wanted to get to know Gavin. She knew she had to tread lightly. Justin had informed her of what had happened to him when he was a kid. She knew that having him open up would be a rocky drive. What do you have planned for the summer? Me? Gavin said, as if there was someone else beside him who could answer that. Not much. I'm heading away soon. Heading where? Meredith explained that she was going off to college in a couple weeks. San Diego State, to be specific. She told Gavin about the school tour, how fresh everything looked, how fresh everything felt, just walking around. She was ready to be new, somewhere. It's starting to feel less and less like home around here. Gavin nodded, even though he never had a home. Never knew what home felt like. Have you ever thought about going away? I don't know. I just got back from... I wouldn't know where to go. What to do? Meredith was the one sympathetically nodding now. Do you miss them? Your parents? As soon as she asked, she regretted it. What kind of question was that to ask someone? What kind of answer did she even expect? She cut him off before he could even answer. I'm sorry, that was a stupid question. I apologize. It's okay, Gavin said. They weren't my real parents. Where are your real parents? Gavin just shook his head, looking off towards the water. I don't know. Have you ever thought about finding them? Gavin took an even longer pause. His tone shifted. I don't think they want me to find them. That's why they left me, I guess. Do you know? What? Do you know what happened? Meredith nodded. Gavin nodded too, looking away. He couldn't look at her. It's the kind of thing most people know. When a little kid's parents by a pack of wolves. Is that what you heard? Meredith nodded. The only thing she could add was that she heard it was vicious. When the cops arrived to the scene, they said it was the most vicious thing they'd ever seen. Gavin reached into his jeans pocket and took out a little tray. Inside were pills, tiny red pills. As he swallowed, he covered his eyes. He hated that she had to see him do this. He hated that he was who he was. Ashamed. The doctor said I have to. A lot of my friends are on medication. There's nothing wrong with that. She tried to be comforting, to make it all okay, but he couldn't look her in the eyes. I think there's something wrong with me. It felt good to say it. As painful as it was true. Being able to say it out loud to this girl who was nice to him. He felt human. Hey, but he finally turned towards her. She leaned in and kissed him. He froze. He had never kissed anyone before. She could tell. He didn't move his lips. He just closed his eyes. She leaned back slightly and smiled. She could sense how nervous he was. Thanks, he said. Meredith burst out laughing, quickly covering her face. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh. That was just a very funny thing to say. I'm sorry. Gavin laughed too. He knew how dumb that was. He also knew that she was still staring at him and smiling. But this time, he would have to lean in And so he did. As their faces moved towards each other, he could feel a warm wash over him, sliding down from his forehead onto his cheeks. His eyes widened. Meredith screamed, but he couldn't hear it. All he could hear was silence. Meredith began screaming even louder. It was blood. Blood was pouring down Gavin's face. He turned. It was Mac, holding a baseball bat, a Louisville Slugger, surrounded by 5 of his friends. Mac smiled, and then swung again. Everything went to black. For a moment, he thought he was dead. His eyes softly flickering open, his face covered with dried blood and sand. It was still dark outside. His left eye was swollen shut. His nose was broken. The left side of his face was completely stiff. He turned to look down the beach. It was empty. There was nobody to be found in any direction. It was tough to tell in that moment what was a dream and what was not. Had Meredith kissed him? Or was this his life? Waking up alone under the black skies. He stood to his feet. He could hear the waves splashing down onto the Sound. What a beautiful juxtaposition. Just a couple yards away from his attack, the delicate dance of nature continued. And sitting ashore, being splashed in, dragged out, and then splashed in again, the Louisville Slugger. Mac and his friends had cared so little about him that they had tossed the assault weapon into the water. And then it had come back onto the sand. Gavin picked it up. He looked at the blood on it. His own blood. Across the word Slugger. There were beer cans and cigarette butts, but no people. Everyone had left. The fire had gone out, replaced by an ominous black ash. Gavin walked up to the fire pit, breathing through the right side of his mouth. He stood there for a moment, spit blood onto the ash, and then kept walking towards the car lot. The windows were smashed, taillights smashed, rear bumper taken off. The word faggot and bitch were spray painted on all sides. Someone had even taken a shit on top of the truck. The words kill yourself were written on the hood. Gramps' car had been destroyed. Gavin stood there, holding the car key, and then put it back into his pocket. He turned, unsure where to walk. So he just went towards the woods. He walked slow, not in any particular direction, but he knew he had to keep moving, so he did. He was about half a mile into the woods now, and he had some vague memory of these woods. Something from within his brain was telling him that this was a shortcut. He wasn't sure exactly where to go, but he just kept going, and so he did. He walked until night turned to dawn, and he could see further in front of him now. He could see so much farther that he was able to see some people about 50 yards away. They were all huddled around a car. A black Saab, Mac and his friends. There were 5 of them. Dax, Eric, Vern, Ian, Lenny. Gavin knelt down behind a tree, out of the way, covered. He watched them. He couldn't tell what exactly they were doing. And then he saw it. Justin. In the dirt next to Mac's car. He wasn't moving. His back was covered in slash marks. His legs and feet were cut up. The dirt around his body was darker than the dirt near the car. The blood had soaked into the ground. Gavin slunk to the ground himself. He was having a hard time keeping his one good eye open. He heard this persistent ringing. It felt like someone was clawing behind his eyes with the nails. And then he saw something else. A 2007 VW Jetta. Meredith's car. Meredith and Devin were sitting on the ground against the trunk. Devin was in hysterics. She was bawling uncontrollably. Meredith had no expression. She just stared at Justin's body as it lay in the cold dirt, surrounded by beer cans. Dax went over to Devin and yanked her backwards by her hair. Meredith stood up to get him off of her, but then Eric came over and smacked Meredith hard across her face, sending her right to the ground. Dax dragged Devin around to the other side of Meredith's car, opened it, forced her inside, and then climbed inside with her. As he got in, Eric came inside with him. They turned up the music, loud. It was so loud that Meredith's car was vibrating. Meredith tried to get inside the car, kicking and punching her own car, until Vern and Ian grabbed her and threw her down onto the bloody dirt near Justin's body. Lenny, the fifth friend, was quietly sitting on Mac's trunk, watching and drinking, as if this was a Saturday afternoon baseball game. And then there was Mac, waiting. Ian and Vern brought Meredith over to Mac. She spit in Mac's face, so Mac punched her in the gut. She fell to her knees. Mac then stood behind her and began to unbuckle his pants. She screamed for him to stop as he got on top of her, burying her face into the dirt. Vern held down her arms while Ian held down her legs. Mac began to pour beer onto the back of her head as he slowly took off his belt. Vern and Ian were laughing and yelling, cheering him on. Mac leaned in closer. His face was right on top of hers. He got right behind her ears and whispered, "This'll teach you to be nice, bitch." Meredith braced herself for the worst. The fear every woman has when she's walking alone at night. The feeling that Devin, her best friend, was experiencing just 10 feet away from her in the backseat of her car. And then she felt something on her face. At first she thought it was more beer or piss or something worse. But it rolled off of her neck down onto the dirt. The color. It was dark. It was blood. Blood was pouring off of Meredith's neck. Had she been so traumatized she didn't even feel the pain of getting cut? And then she could feel the pressure on her hands being lifted. She was now able to look up. In front of her she could see them. Black steel-tipped boots. Oh my God, she thought. It was Gavin, standing right in front of her, in his blood-soaked white t-shirt and jeans, as Vern, the one who had been holding down her arms, fell to his knees, the back of his head drenched in blood. It was rolling down over his face. Vern reached behind to grab his vibrating head until Gavin kicked him in his back, sending him face first into the dirt. Mac looked up in shock and then fell backwards off of Meredith's legs next to Ian, who had been holding down Meredith. Gavin held the Louisville Slugger bat and teed off across the right side of Vern's face, snapping the bat in half. You could hear the crunch of Vern's skull. Half of Vern's nose was now on the baseball bat, along with his upper jaw. Vern lay on the ground, twitching. Mac and Ian got to their feet as Lenny hopped off Mac's car and charged Gavin. Gavin took a step forward before Lenny could get into the proper position and then kicked Lenny's knee with the bottom of his boot, which inverted Lenny's leg. He screamed, clutching his leg, turning pale white. As he began to vomit on himself from the excruciating pain, Gavin walked in around Lenny and then kicked in the other leg. Lenny now had 2 legs pointing in opposite directions. All he could do was fall to the ground and continue puking on himself until he started to choke on his own vomit. Ian took out a knife and then swung at Gavin, who caught the blade in his hand, held it there, so Ian could watch Gavin's blood squeezing through Gavin's knuckles. Gavin didn't budge. Ian tried to take the knife out of Gavin's grip, but he couldn't, until Gavin let go for a second so that he could wind up and use his right elbow to break Ian's throat. Knife as he clutched his throat, trying to breathe. Gavin kneed Ian so hard in the crotch that Ian immediately fell over onto his side and rolled around, choking for air. Vern, Lenny, and Ian were all now writhing around on the ground in pain. First up, Vern. Gavin put him out of his misery by raising up his steel-tipped boot into the air and bringing him back down onto Vern's face, submerging his boot right through Vern's skull. When Gavin lifted up his shoe, Vern's brains were on Gavin's socks. Up next, Lenny. Both of his legs had snapped in half. It was only fitting for Gavin to pick up Lenny's right arm and snap his elbow behind his back. For symmetry, Gavin picked up Lenny's left arm and snapped that elbow behind his back. Lenny's limbs were now all pointing behind his face. Lenny's entire body was convulsing. Gavin let him twitch. Last of these three, Ian. He was beginning to get his breathing passages back in order, so Gavin rectified that by sitting on top of Ian's chest, wrapping his hands around Ian's throat, and choking until he could hear Ian's larynx crunch like a stepped-on centipede. He squeezed until Ian's eyes popped out of their sockets. Gavin stood up, wiped the eyeball mucus off his t-shirt, and then looked down to see him. Mac, still laying there frozen with fear. Gavin reached down to grab Ian's knife. He held it up, staring into Mac's soul, what was left of it. Gavin casually walked over to Mac's back tire and stabbed it. They watched all the air leave. Then he casually walked over to the other back tire, stabbed that one too. They watched it deflate. Gavin did this for all 4 tires. Then he slowly walked back over towards Mac and knelt down. Mac was trembling. He had already pissed his pants. Judging by the smell, he had lost control on the other end as well. Gavin leaned in, inches from his face, and whispered, "Run." He got up and ran as fast as he could into the woods. Gavin watched him run for his dear life. He smiled. He actually smiled, until he remembered. He was not alone. Meredith. She was laying there too, against her car, watching this, watching all of this. She couldn't believe it. All she could do was point to her car. They had no idea what was coming. Dax and Eric. The music was so loud inside Meredith's car that they were completely unaware of what was happening just 10 feet away. Eric was in the front seat, singing along to some country song loudly. He cracked open a fresh beer before yelling, "Hurry up already! Don't be greedy! God damn!" Dax was in the back seat, holding down Devin and having his way with her as she lay there, completely silent and still. Dax yelled to the front seat, "Quit your belly aching, there's plenty of this to go around." There was a tiny tap on the driver's side window. When Eric turned to see who it was, his eyes widened with fear. Gavin's fist burst through the driver's side window across Eric's face, completely dazing him. Gavin then took Eric's head, placed it over the now smashed-through car window, and let it hang there. With all of the weight and power from the right side of his body, Gavin leapt up and came down with his right forearm across Eric's neck, snapping it instantly. Eric's spinal cord ripped up through the skin on his back. Gavin opened the car door, grabbed Eric by the collar, and flung him onto the dirt. When he turned, Dax swung with all of his might across Gavin's face. Gavin's face flew to the left. But only his face. His body didn't flinch at all. Dax watched in horror as Gavin's face slowly turned back to him. "Oh, shit!" Gavin grabbed Dax by his shoulders, pulled him close, and annihilated Dax's face with his headbutt. Dax was stunned. He fell backwards onto the dirt. Gavin turned him over. Dax reached back with whatever life he still had left, so Gavin snapped both of his wrists in half. Dax screamed. Gavin took what was left of the bloody Louisville Slugger, the jagged half that remained, and jammed it right through the back of Dax where the sun don't shine. Dax screamed so loud you would have thought his vocal cords would have imploded. To quiet him down, Gavin took the bat out of Dax's butt, then drove it through the back of his head. Meredith dove into the back seat. She wrapped her arms around Devon's body, frantically trying to help her up in the most gentle way possible. Devon was catatonic. Meredith tried reassuring her that it was all over now. It was okay. Devon didn't move. She pleaded with Devon to get up, but Devon wasn't moving. Her eyes were open, but there was no light behind them. Meredith wept, shaking Devon's body to move, but she wasn't moving. Dev, we have to help Justin. We have to help Justin, Dev. Devon didn't move. Meredith got out of the car and knelt towards Justin's body. She didn't know what to tend to first. His whole body was now purple. Meredith leaned in, listening and feeling for a heartbeat. I can feel a pulse, she said. We have to get him to a hospital. Come on, help him up. We have to get him help. Meredith struggled to get him up until Gavin walked over, softly lifted him up, and then gently placed him into the front seat of Meredith's car. Meredith turned, went over to the corpse of Dax, reached into his back pocket and took out her keys. She got back in and turned on the engine. Gav, we gotta go. We gotta get them help. Come on, get in. Gavin shut the passenger side door so Justin was secure, and then he walked over next to the window of Meredith. Let's go, come on. Gavin leaned in. I can't. What? What do you mean? Come on, we gotta go. Gavin was looking away again. What is wrong, Gavin? Why can't you come with us? Gavin finally looked up and told her the secret that he had been carrying his whole life. It wasn't wolves. Meredith looked at him, confused. She didn't know how to help. What? What wasn't wolves? The thing that killed those people. The people who said they were my parents. It wasn't wolves. Meredith knew. She knew before he even said it. It was me. Gavin took the tiny tray out of his pocket, the tiny tray of pills, poured them onto the ground, and then squished them into the dirt with his steel-tipped boots. He stared at them, these tiny little dots he had considered miracle drugs for so long. Now they were gone, and he knew what that meant. He knew what he would become. He felt her hand touch his. Please, Gav, come with me, please. He paused, and then shook his head no. I don't belong out there. Meredith's eyes welled up with tears. Go, he said. They need help. Meredith turned away, and then sped out of the woods back towards the main road. Gavin was now alone. He watched the car drive away, until he couldn't see it anymore. He could feel it starting. He dropped to his knees. That pain shooting throughout his whole body. His bones beginning to elongate and reshape grotesquely. His skeletal structure shifting and distorting. His hands stretching and deforming. Fingers turning into claws. Bones visibly cracking and growing. Skin stretching and tearing as his body grows fur. His face beginning to morph, starting with his nose as it turns into a snout while his mouth transforms into a set of sharp, feral teeth. Gavin, the real Gavin, stood up. Gavin turned to look into the direction of where Mac had run. The hunt had begun.
I was lost in the shadows, wandering without a name, through a world so cold and lonely, waiting for a spark to flame. Then I saw you there, across the starry night sky. Two souls found each other on the other side, love shining like a beacon, guiding us to the light. We danced under the moonlight, hearts joining as one, with whispers of forever. We knew our journey had begun. In the silence of the moment, our destinies aligned. Two souls found each other on the other side, love shining like a beacon, guiding us to the light. Together we fly, wings open wide, faith and love as our guide. Through the storms and the quiet tide, we hold the stars inside. Two souls found each other on the other side, love shining like a beacon, guiding us to